Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the first Knowledge Valorisation Talk of 2026. I'm Michiel Scheffer, I'm President of the EIC Board, and the European Innovation Council, EIC, is basically the venture arm of the European Commission, where we fund companies that come out of university research. So we are in the core of valorization, which is the topic of today. Just to start with you have Slido on which you can have questions. I will repeat that several times, but let me start to share with you three key messages which are central to our discussion today. The first one is that Europe needs to generate more economic and more societal value out of research and innovation. The European Competitiveness Report, published last month in January, sends a very clear message. Europe's competitiveness depends on breakthrough innovation and the impact from innovation. The recent EU Foresight report also stresses this strongly. Europe's security and open strategic autonomy will depend more than ever on our ability to innovate and compete with other economies in the world. So there's an urgent need to accelerate commercialization and uptake of research results across the EU. The second message is that transdisciplinarity drives innovation and can create novel solutions to complex, real-world challenges. The answer to those challenges often require engagement of several disciplines, as well as close cooperation with a wide range of stakeholders. Transdisciplinarity breaks silos and integrates knowledge across boundaries. Scientific disciplines and technological domains are converging to drive innovation from fundamental science to market application and societal impact. In biotech, for example, we see how biology, engineering, and technology come together to address complex challenges in healthcare. Autonomous manufacturing or autonomous driving involve different technologies and sciences, such as AI and machine learning, robotics, data science, and more. Or let's take a technology like AI, for example. We see how it merges with different scientific disciplines and transforms entire sectors across economy and society. So my third message is to improve our competitiveness and prosperity. We need to enable researchers and innovators to work together in a way that cuts across disciplinary boundaries and unleash creativity and innovation. In today's talk, I would like us to focus on innovation-led impact and hear from our panelists how they harness the power of transdisciplinarity for innovation with real impact. I encourage all of you to join the discussion and to send your questions via Slido with the hashtag EU Valorization Talks for the upcoming QA. And you see the box of Slido in the corner of the screen. Let me now introduce our panelists and kick off the discussion. I will start with Karim Selouane. He is a Deputy Director for European and International Affairs at CEREMA, that is a public agency that focuses on ecological transition and climate adaptation for infrastructure and territories. He's also a member of the Mission Board on Adaptation to Climate Change of the European Commission. Karim, for you the first question. The EU missions are, by definition, excellent examples of transdisciplinarity in research and innovation and about achieving and delivering real impact. How do you bring together different research and innovation areas and other stakeholders to address the challenges of climate change?
Thank you for this question and this relevant question. The issue is how we could deal with adaptation, how the adaptation could be a new opportunity for the research to become more transversal with more transdisciplinary research program with public and private partnership. That's why we have decided at the beginning in the one specific example related to the building sector to see to achieve this objective, we need to share a common vocabulary, a common definition. That's why it's very important to have the same principle. in this slide, you could see that the 10 principles dedicated to the climate change adaptation. Why? Because we need to be sure that we share the same objectives, the same terminology, to have in the hand of the hand the same systemic modelization, the same systemic methodology aligned with the local policy and very operational. In this case, we have decided, for example, to, I try to see this slide, but it's not. Up. Yes. For example, this transversal approach is very important to see how each part of this very process, this workflow, could propose a specific opportunity for each technical and science field. For example, this transdisciplinarity based on this specific 10 principle could propose a specific innovative solution from the climate hazard innovative solution, from a specific modelization and research program related to find specific issues, also to determine a specific impact, but also to help the policymaker, the private sector, the private sector to determine specific consequences, also to propose a common solution to mitigate the risk. But this impact of assessment of adaptation should be based on very specific international researcher, specific scientist methodology, but based on these 10 principles that I showed you just before. One tangible example, this is a use case of the systemic problematic and the systemic issues based on the urban planning system. As you know, the urban planning needs to converge a specific opposite issues, opposite stakeholders, for example, for the mobilities, building sectors, energy, waste, water system. All this systemic and all these issues sometimes are not enough related or connected, but if you want to achieve an adaptation system, a resilient process, you need to have a common research program. That's why the adaptation became a new opportunity, so to fail the siloed approach and so to promote the systemic approach based on a common model, a common mapping, a common planning. Has this new model and schemas related to the resilience in the systemic urban planning system. And now the European Commission, with the Adaptation Mission Board, launched a new European program based on Adaptation Hub. What we mean about the Adaptation Hub? The idea is how you could create, in the scale of a geographical area, it could be a city, a region, how you could promote inside your geographical area a specific research and scientist ecosystem in balance with public and private sector, so to propose a common adaptation ecosystem to promote a new innovative solution, profitable, for example, the new ecosystem, create the new job, to create a new economical opportunity for all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim. Thank you, Karim, for sharing your experience. In an area, I'm a geographer, so quite close to my training, so very recognizable. And it's very important that you share that the transdisciplinarity, engagement and collaboration work in practice for innovation solutions to climate change. I'm turning now to our second panelist, Baljan Orazbayeva. She's the Manager for Strategic Initiatives at the University Industry Innovation Network, UIIN, and she leads the research team and designs innovative training and consultancy programs. She has also been part of the EU-funded Valorisation project that aimed at enhancing the entrepreneurial potential and the social impact of social sciences and humanities research. I want to ask you, Baljan, how do you support universities collaborate across disciplines through your work with the University Industry Innovation Network? And could you give us some examples?
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I want to say that transdisciplinarity is often something that we see as an initiative or as a project, whereas I think what we definitely see in our work when we work with universities is that it should be treated as institutional capability. And I guess that's what I want to touch upon today. I'm speaking on behalf of UIN. We've been around for more than 14 years now. Since 2012, we've been supporting a global community of organizations and universities, and we do all things around external engagement. So transdisciplinarity and external engagement is at the heart of everything that we do as UIN, and we do so by supporting our community of members, by organizing all kinds of events for them and bringing very passionate people together to discuss and exchange on the topic. We conduct research on external engagement, university business collaboration, and entrepreneurship at universities. And we translate that research into very practical resources for our community. We enable professional development by providing training, capacity building, and masterclasses of different sorts on those topics as well. And last but not least, we help universities and organizations by accelerating institutional change, building their capacity for external engagement, partnerships, and entrepreneurship. One thing that we certainly see happening a lot is that we tend to think of universities as organizations, and we call upon them to become more engaged, more impactful, more innovative, but that doesn't happen overnight. And what we also see is that they may be at different levels of maturity or have different levels of readiness, so to say. And this is one of the examples that I would like to present, actually. So at UIN, we've been thinking a lot about how can we make sure that universities are given a chance to start from the place and given the resources that they have at that exact moment. And this is why we've come up with the concept of external engagement maturity, and that is the framework that is at the heart of our institutional diagnostic that we use to help universities build out the capacity for external engagement. So essentially, the engagement maturity framework that we have developed sees the external engagement as a transformation journey that is basically a stage process of institutional evolution. And what it does really is that helps you as an organization to reflect where do you stand in terms of external engagement and whether you have the right structures and the right culture in place. And as we can see on this slide, the stages go all the way from emerging to leading, basically providing organizations with an opportunity to look at their transformation really as a journey and as a roadmap on becoming more engaged and innovative. In order for it to be able to happen, though, along the way, universities and organizations are meant to have the right building blocks in place when it comes to external engagement. And this is where we talk about the traits that are not static and that are emerging, developing, and sometimes reframing along the way. And here we're talking about evolution, reciprocity, enablement, scaffolding, empowerment, and direction. All of those, the traits or essential ingredients, if you will, that are essential for universities in this case to be able to have the right setting in place to be able to do transdisciplinarity that can actually lead to impact. So that's the sort of framework that we wanted to bring forward as we are talking about transdisciplinarity, so that the organization have not just the right people in place, but also the right support structures that they can develop over time.
Thank you, Baljan, for this very insightful presentation and examples. Interesting to see the institutional focus, and I love the ladder of moving on in capabilities. And it's interesting to add that on Karim's introduction that's really focused on language and on terms. And I'm turning then to Esther de Smet, who is Senior Policy Advisor at the Research Department of Ghent University, and you work closely on three linked areas: societal impact of research, information management, and research communication, aiming to ensure that research has a real-world impact. So how do you reflect on that, let's say, having 2 feet on the ground? So how do you do that to foster researchers to collaborate across disciplines, across departments, and also with partners beyond academia?
Yes, well, it's not an easy job, as Valjean already mentioned. It's about building a whole mindset based on building blocks and an institutional capability as well. So at Ghent University, the support around multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity is essentially embedded within our strategy on fostering a healthy impact culture. So we try to link different policy areas such as open science, interdisciplinarity, and societal impact. And that means that we recognize that there are different pathways to get to societal impact, and that we need to find a way to make this palatable to all disciplines within our university. That means that we need to create the context for this. So the policy, the strategies, and all of those strategies and context elements are essentially based on fostering an impact literate approach. So we want to make both our research community, but also our leadership and our support services impact literate, and offer our research community also the necessary infrastructure around this. And so what I would like to focus on now is really 2 of those building blocks in detail, so that people can really get to grips with how we try to do it. And you'll see that one of the crucial elements, for us at least, is finding a way to enhance our commitment to responsible research assessment. So in order to create that space for interdisciplinarity and societal impact, you need to create the rewards and incentives as well. And so that means being a signatory member of COARA, of course, and trying to apply all those principles to the evaluation of research and researchers at the individual, group and institutional level, which means that we have to make evaluations fit for purpose. There isn't just one size fits all, because we're with so many different stakeholders, so many different types of research and researchers in their career aspirations as well. And so 2 specific examples within that larger context of creating rewards and recognition is changing your career model for your professors. And so what we did is we integrated open science, interdisciplinarity, and socioeconomic value creation, or valorisation, as part of the dimension of research, not as something separate. It is how you do research. And another thing is focus more on the element of team science. Impact is a team effort. So you need to provide frameworks for assessment of team science as well. Now, we have a lot of other initiatives and incentives that we can create, and a lot of you will recognize some of them. For instance, we have interdisciplinary doctorates. We have core facilities in order for people to have that infrastructure to work together, to collaborate internally but externally as well. We have limited number of interdisciplinary professorships, but what I think we are most proud of is our system of bringing in knowledge brokerage, actually creating transdisciplinary collaboration consortia. And we do this on 2 levels. On the one hand, more traditionally, the business development centers that are aimed at business collaboration, and they have their business development manager bringing together around a certain theme, loads of researchers making connection to industry. But what we've added as kind of a complementary system is interdisciplinary research centers aimed at societal impact. We have 9 of those at the moment, and they also have an impact officer, a knowledge broker. We fund that ourselves, so it's quite a permanent position. We really invest in boots on the ground, so that you can really benefit from central coordination of the program, but also having someone really close to the researchers and the stakeholders of that research, looking at the impact strategy of a larger group around a larger theme. And their mission is mainly being organized in an interdisciplinary way, find a viable way to sustain all their activities, working towards societal impact. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. We've also already evaluated them. We've created their evaluation framework together with them, so nothing about them without them. And if you're interested in seeing what comes out of that, we have kind of organized all of this in our Research Explorer, which is kind of the, it shines a light on all the impact we have at Ghent University, and you can see some impact narratives there coming out of these groups.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you for those very practical examples at university level. Before asking a second round of questions, I would like to remind you, dear audience, to submit your questions via Slido, which you see now on the screen, either by using the hashtag or by using the QR code. I would like to follow up with you, Esther, with the follow-up question. Sorry. When we talk about transdisciplinarity, it is important to include the role of social sciences and humanities in research. How can we ensure the role of SSH in innovation? And do you have any practices you can show?
Yes, well, let's take you back to those IDC, those consortia aimed at societal impact. We should say that most of them are driven through social sciences and humanities research. And we see great examples coming from them within their own disciplines. So, for instance, we have a Center on Migration Studies, which brings together elements of social sciences, anthropology, but also law, criminology, mental health. And a great example of them collaborating across those disciplines is helping the WHO recently in the wake of the COVID pandemic by showing what the real impact is of all the measures that countries put in place for refugees, and how we can actually, through those research insights, change the lives of those people and change policy for the better. So really innovating policy based on real life examples. Another example is we have a center in medieval history, which I think some of you might think, what's the societal impact of studies like that? But what they've done is they've collaborated in the Blue Balance project with urban planning, but also with psychologists, with economics, looking at what could be the public involvement in a sustainable development of the coastal area in Flanders. What's the role of industry in those areas? What's the role of climate change in those areas? And how can we bring together economic endeavors, but also cultural heritage, and how people look at those elements as being part of that population in order for that landscape to develop. And then maybe finally, the more traditional integration is we have a center on digital innovation, where through living labs, they talk with citizens and start out from almost technological innovations, but bring in other disciplines to better understand the needs of those citizens. And so really create a living lab in your own city, and then come up with different technological innovations for the city, bringing in different backgrounds, not just the citizens, but also the researchers.
It's never too late to learn from history. Yeah? Thank you.
It's one of the most important research areas nowadays.
Thank you for these examples. Baljan, if I turn to you, how do you support universities to create real impact for society, for working together across disciplines and with other stakeholders in particular, such as industry? Could you give some examples?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much. So when we talk about transdisciplinarity and especially innovation-led impact as a result of it, we see that in many cases, universities would have two things, right? So they will have either the people who are very much capable in supporting researchers and actually being those boundary spanning agents. And the second is that something that we talked about before already, having the right conditions and right structures in place. So I would like to talk about two things: how we support universities in developing those structures and approaches, and second, also briefly touch upon how we raise the capability for collaboration, external engagement, and transdisciplinarity. So universities are naturally very good at collaborating, actually. It's just often it happens on an ad hoc level. So there might be loads of different wonderful initiatives happening, but the challenge is how to make it a little bit more comprehensive and a little bit more manageable. And that's where UIN comes in and works with our great stakeholders and members, where we help them develop the approaches that are not one-size-fits-all kind of approach, but are really individually co-created together with them, where they understand what is the purpose behind the partnering and how they can best identify players inside the university and how they can best identify those partners and really work with them towards achieving impact together. So, and we do that kind of work where we basically help universities to develop approach to strategic partnerships, and we do that with universities of all different shapes and sizes, whether it's University of Applied Sciences, technological universities, or comprehensive universities. And some examples may include UCL in the UK, we work with KTH in Sweden, we worked with ANU in Australia, and so on and so far. But there are also examples where we take this approach a little bit further, when not only do we help them develop a strategy, we then also together work out a roadmap for implementation. And that is kind of work that we have done, for example, with ATU in Ireland, where a university basically got merged from several very strong institutions. And the challenge was how can we make it possible for a university to have a very comprehensive approach to engagement and also make it happen across not just boundaries of disciplines, but actually across campuses. So that's also the part of work that we have done, where we brought everyone together and we defined the vision for engagement. We identified the key assets and strongest points of the university. We brought everyone together, defined the language, and then we also workshopped a roadmap towards achieving that vision. Now, the question is also often, how can we measure impact and how can we communicate that impact of that transdisciplinary collaboration and engagement that the universities can do? So this is where we work together with universities and helping them develop their own frameworks for capturing and communicating impact. We call it Pathway to Impact. It's very catchy, but it's actually what it is. And the idea behind this is for university to, again, develop something that would individually work for them. And that is kind of work that we have done, for example, with Ca' Foscari University, Venice in Italy, with a focus on social sciences and humanities, in fact, because for them it was very important not to overlook those disciplines, but also acknowledge the importance of what they do in achieving the impact when we talk about transdisciplinarity. And as we all talked about today, it's very important to empower people and to provide them with incentives and to acknowledge their motivations, but also provide them with opportunity to develop skill for transdisciplinary collaboration. So that is another part of work that we do at UIN when we help universities basically create teams and develop the capacity for either external engagement, partnerships, or entrepreneurship. So we provide that kind of training either on a bespoke basis where we tailor training programs, for example, for partnerships. This is where we work together with university teams that are sitting in the intersection between, for example, businesses and governments who are responsible for partnerships, but we also work together with researchers as well, helping them develop the capacity for engagement for valorization purpose.
Thank you, Baljan, for giving very tangible examples. I think we have a lot of abbreviations of universities to remind if you want to go further in depth. I want to turn to Karim In your work on climate change and adaptation, how are you using transdisciplinarity approaches to achieve societal and economic impacts, including the benefits for citizens? And could you give some examples?
Yes, of course. What is very important at the beginning is to be sure that you measure a very tangible KPI or some very tangible impacts is how to define specific governance. Because the governance is a way or a tool so to onboard with you all the stakeholders. Sometimes this is the stakeholders that they are never talk together or they are never start a specific connection. This cycle of the governance, it's a way so to start a new dialogue. And the new dialogue, and this KPI should be validated by the science, by the university. For example, with the human science research, it could propose some good diagnosis of the vulnerability of the population, to have a very good mapping of the settlement of the population, etc., etc. And this governance, it's observatory that it could help the policymaker, the private sectors, the research program and institution to co-design a specific measure, a specific evaluation. But the question, notably in the context of adaptation, is it's not relevant to measure yet on a short term. It's how you could be sure that your KPI it could be maintained during a long period, because the impact of adaptation should follow, for example, and this is the big deal and the big issues in the climate change adaptation. This is how you be sure that your solution could be aligned with the predictive climate change modelization. And this climate change modelization depends on which scenarios it could be chosen by all the stakeholders and how you could determine the specific uncertainty of the final results. That's why it's a good balance between your tangible KPIs so to track your impact, social impact, economical impact, financial impacts, but in the same time to be sure that your previous model, your previous indicator, your previous input could be relevant after 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, for example. This is a big challenge, but to be sure that the risk, the uncertainty could be updated, you need to onboard with you all the stakeholders. And with the stakeholders, that's why we are discussing about the common languages. These stakeholders should base the agreements based on the specific 10 principles that I defined during my previous presentation.
I'm wondering, and there's also a question from the audience on this, and I will address it first to Esther, is how do we find a common language in transdisciplinarity projects and talk about the impact without oversimplifying the research or losing complexity? And to Karim, I was wondering afterwards, how do you keep it common as a language, but also accessible for citizens, which also needs to simplify it? But Esther first.
I think we have some great examples within those IDC where it's clear that you need these boundary persons, these people that can bring a certain vulnerability to everyone's position as well. We're there to learn from each other in a respectful way. And that means that we need to find out what each of us is there for. And that means we need time. We need to make time to have those conversations at the start of a project. It's what we would call, it's almost like what a dog does when it goes to the park and just looks around and senses what is everyone's position in this conversation. There are, from sociology and psychology, loads of instruments to do that, but not every researcher is schooled in these things. So that's why it's good you have a knowledge broker, you have someone who's really an expert on providing boundary objects, things that you can agree on to make it more practical, instead of just being this almost high-level academic expert showing off all their expertise and knowledge, because that might create kind of walls between you and your stakeholders. So I think one of the basic elements is indeed that language, but from a position of respect and humility. And I'm not saying that academics are not used to this, but it takes some getting to know each other. And you should see it as a careful dance in which you find what is it really that connects us and that we need to find a solution to, and what is everyone able to bring to the table in order to find a solution to this. And maybe not each element will be taken up at that point in time, but the connection is made. The collaboration feeds other projects. And I think clarity and honesty, openness about what you are actually doing together is really important.
And Karim, how is the challenge of interdisciplinarity at one hand, the other one being able to communicate with citizens who have
I think that
jargon?
Yes, but for me, it's not an opposite term between the oversimplifying or the complexity. It's not because it's complex, it's too simple, or it's not because it's simple, it's not complex. Very important. But just before, I told that it's very important to organize or to co-organize a new governance for innovative solution, to be sure that it could be implemented, to be sure that you could find some end user, should be sure that it could be operated during a long term. For example, we're doing how we want to use this solution and how you could be sure that this solution will be maintained during the long period. Very important, because this is not a one-shot solution. This is a long use of new technical solution. But I think that you could have a several layer of stakeholders with a specific capacity of understanding, but the common point, I repeat, the common point is the 10 principles, sense principle dialogue, principle terminology, to be sure that we share the same language, the same vocabulary, and the same understand of what we are looking for, so to valorize some new innovation and why we are looking for new innovation, for which uses, for which stakeholders, for which sector, or for which benefits. But all these elements should be validated with a specific ecosystem. And the question is, I come back to my first idea, this is the governance.
What is important, you both say that you need time to be able to organize iterations. Barjena, I'm turning to you. There was a question before on pitfalls. Since you have a lot of examples, what are the don'ts? What are the risks of the pitfalls that can appear in interdisciplinarity and in reaching out to stakeholders?
Well, maybe I will then build up on what has just been said, because indeed not spending enough time at the beginning and not aligning on some of the objectives and perhaps defining the common vocabulary and not understanding what is it everyone is trying to get out of that collaboration is certainly a detrimental factor at the beginning. And therefore, it's very important to actually take time indeed and talk about those things. So misalignment, I think, is often what we hear is something that can come across as a barrier. Another one is, of course, perhaps not having the right support structures in place, coming from both organizations. If we're talking about university business collaboration, for example, is that perhaps the researchers are being left alone in collaborating with their partners and not having enough support, or very often not knowing that support actually exists, because that's also what we often hear could happen within the university walls, and by the way, also can happen on the other side too. We often hear that another barrier for a researcher could be the bureaucracy, just also trying to deal with all of the paperwork that unfortunately comes together with the new projects, new initiatives, especially if you're embarking on a journey to work together with an industry partner. There might be some IP-related issues. So some of those barriers are there. But then again, as I think we all talked about it already, if there are right support structures in place, or if they're also aware of those support structures, I think there is a possibility to work them out at the right time. Because if there is a motivation and if there is a shared purpose and common understanding of what is it that we are looking to achieve together, and really envisioning that impact that we are talking about today, then I think those barriers could be removed and the collaboration can happen.
Thank you. So I'm just turning to you, because a number of questions also point to what does it mean in terms of incentives for researchers, and then especially for the younger ones, the early career researchers. What helps to do this?
What helps? Well, I know we can't create time magically, but we do need to create maybe more space to really go about a more slower science. Sometimes there needs to be a quick response if we have a pandemic, if we have a big crisis. But at the same time, I think you need to look at, for early researchers, are all the incentives and all the structures in which they're being assessed, are they in balance? What are all the requirements for their PhD? Are they very quantitative, or is there really also time built in to have those conversations, to think about the open science elements of their work, think about the public engagement elements as well? So I think a responsibility of an institution, of an organization, is of course providing them with training. But if they don't have the time or the commitment to that training, it's kind of a misalignment. So we need to really have a conversation internally with your research community. What is it that you need that we can provide for you? And I think maybe we don't do that enough. Ask them what they really need at which point in time. And also, I think, provide the bigger frameworks. Show them that what you as an organization stand for is reflected in all the incentive and rewards that are out there. And that, again, should be a walk the talk. It should be aligned. And maybe another thing that we could do is create a bit more dialogue within and create communities of practice in which these young researchers can find each other and discuss the issues that they face together.
Thank you. What I take home is the time condition, and especially since we work a lot with projects, often projects have a duration of 4 years.
Yes.
Sometimes that's long, but sometimes it's too short.
Yes.
So also missions which have a more programmatic approach are important. We are always at the end of something, and it's time to wrap up. So I'm wondering if you have, let's say, a final message from this discussion and the questions of the audience, thank you, to share in about 45 seconds. Karim?
Yes, I think that we are living in a very complex periods with the complex issues and complex interconnection. I think this period, it could be a very good opportunity for the research ecosystem to make a very relevant shift to accelerate the transdisciplinarity, and this transdisciplinarity could become a new opportunity for job, for create a new attractivity for territories, and perhaps to create a new business model for private company, for the public institution, or also for the societies and the communities.
Esther, what is your take on for a last 45 seconds?
Last 45 seconds. I think it's clear that we need to create the institutional space. That's important, while at the same time respecting academic freedom and fundamental research. They are important as well. But that also shows us that academic freedom has its limits, in the sense that the community, the academic community, might not be as representative as we might think it is. And so that brings me to that other idea. Yes, we need institutional space, we need the financial incentives as well, the possibilities, the opportunities, but equally important is the ethics of it all. Are we actually collaborating on an equal, equitable footing? Are we approaching innovation in an ethical way, allowing multiple voices and finding innovation in the right way to actually change our world?
Thank you for bringing the ethical dimension. Maljena, what is your take? What do you take home from this discussion, and what is important to add that is missing?
I think what I would like to say is that transdisciplinarity, external engagement is people's game. As much as we talk about collaboration between organization, disciplines, maybe even nations, in the end of the day, it's all about people. It's all about how we empower them, how we support them. And this is why what I would like to bring forward here is that it's quite important to, I guess, acknowledge the importance of those who are standing at the forefront of collaboration and really providing them that support. And I'm talking about researchers, but I'm also talking about people like you who are supporting them. So that is one thing that I would like to say.
It's important that people share, as we are doing now in only an hour, share their experiences and learn from each other. And what I also take home is that the importance of, let's say, the arena around the university, how cities are important places in terms of exchanging and learning and deepening. And also then what is important is the support of the local authority itself as well to set that example. We are getting to a close. Thank you, Karim, Baljan, Esther, for your time and valuable insights. I would like also the audience to thank for following up this session and this valorization talk. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we have been able to cover most of your questions. If not, email exists and other ways to share it online, for example. So stay tuned for an exciting series of knowledge valorization talks throughout the entire year. You can already mark your calendar for the next talk that will be on the 21st of April, I guess at the same time. And I wish you all, and I would thank the audience, and I would thank my speakers, and wish you all a good, nice rest of the day, of a working day.